Hi everyone, welcome back. My name is Magnolia Heaton. I'm the owner and founder and clinical director of Love is Healing LLC. We specialize in shamanic healing and psychotherapy, and we specialize in supporting people through complex trauma treatment. Okay, today I want to talk a little bit about my dad. So let's see. I think, let me make sure my phone is on silent. Okay. I know that in general, if you look around social media, there's a bunch of different messages, right? And at this point, I think there's so much content out there that you can probably find information that aligns with your point of views if you look for it. And so for me, recalled love is healing, right? And that's not for nothing. That's not for naught. I sincerely do believe that love heals, right? But talking a little bit about love, to me, love means the biblical application, that it's patient, that it's kind, that it doesn't boast, it doesn't envy, that kind of thing, right? It's gentle. I believe that love is giving each other grace and different things like that. But that said, like, I do believe that in order for a relationship to be successful in love, both people have to actively make a conscious choice of having a working definition of love and then agreeing to behave that way, show up that way in a relationship, right? And so that's my perspective. I will come to any video and represent that. Now, I know there's a lot of content out there that talks a lot about parents and different things like that. Right. And so for me, I've thought about it and I've been through my own process, right? I mean, I feel like I've consciously been working on myself for the past 9 years, not more, right? Self-reflecting, therapy, journaling, that kind of stuff. So like spiritual work, all that stuff. And so with parents, there's a lot of messages out there that say like, oh yeah, parents are bad or they needed to do better and stuff like that. And I understand. And so today I'm here to kind of speak on that more. Trying to figure out how much to disclose. Since this is primarily focused on my dad, I'll talk about him more than anything then. And so, okay, my journey with my dad. My dad died of COVID complications in January 2021. So we just passed the anniversary this past week, actually. It's death anniversary. And so he was Mexican and he grew up with a lot of trauma. I know that in his family, like for example, he grew up with a dad who was kind and things. I didn't get to meet his dad, unfortunately. He died way before I was born, but like he was married to an alcoholic woman, right? My dad's mom was an alcoholic woman, and she was kind of a messy drunk and would prowl about the neighborhood and be found in the front yard drunk, like in the mornings and stuff like that, right? And so I can only imagine how hard that must be. I don't know what the exact content of this. I'll just say here, trigger warning if alcoholism, narcissistic abuse, any of these things are triggering for you. Then there's that. She was very verbally abusive, right, to him. She would berate him and different things like that. In retrospect, given his point of attraction, I mean, yeah, definitely I feel like she bullied him, and I imagine that he was bullied by peers or uncles, like family members and different things like that too. And so he went on and he married my mom, and she called her an alcoholic too, right? But a functioning alcoholic and a dry alcoholic at times too. She was very similar to his mom, right? And so for me, it was painful for my sisters. It was painful growing up in that household. My mom was extremely verbally abusive and she was a bully. And it was tricky. And she cheated on my dad several times and she left the house, right? Several times in my upbringing. And so, like, I don't know, I guess it was tumultuous and chaotic and different things like that. She was hard to read, all these things. And for me, I was close to my dad because he was emotionally available as much as he could be. And he helped shape me in a lot of ways, mentally and spiritually and things. But I struggled with two main things in our relationship. I struggled with him not being as emotionally available and supportive as I wanted. One, if you are familiar with astrology or believe in it, like I have a Cancer moon, so all the feelings. Also, my Jupiter's in Cancer, lots of feelings. And so there's that. And even if you don't believe in astrology, like that's totally fine. But I wanted to mention it in case it's relevant for you. And so I wish that he would have been more emotionally available, right? Like when I was happy, oh my gosh, I'm so proud I did this thing, right? Often, bro. And I've accomplished a ton of accolades in my life, right? But he'd be like, you need to be humble. And it's not like I'm sitting here bragging to people about it. But like, can't you be happy with me? You saw me through this whole journey, right? And so that was a challenge for like, I'm sad. Well, there's no need to be sad. So there's a lot of emotional bypassing there, right? And it was hard. And as a kid, I hated it. And honestly, like, I've hated it my whole life. I've only come to understand it recently. So I'll come back to that. So the emotional bypassing, there's a lot of spiritual bypassing too, because like, well, that's the way that God wants it, or what does God want for you, that kind of thing, right? That was tricky too, because like, well, I think he's right, and it was a really high biblical perspective. What I needed in that moment was guidance, right? Not like a dictator or a righteous person or something. And then like, I mean, I needed him to protect me too, but he didn't. He wouldn't protect me against my mom and be like, well, that's just your mom. So there's a lot of enabling there, right? And so it was tricky. So the emotional bypassing, the spiritual bypassing, and the enabling. Mm, yeah. And like, I want to say my dad taught me a lot of positives. He's the one who got me into metaphysics and religions and spirituality and psychology and integrative health. Honestly, everything that I am today, I can attribute to my dad. All my success, my mentality, my entrepreneurial spirit and skills, my people skills, I can 100%, maybe like 80. If I were to talk to a therapist, I'd be like, well, it's not all him. Okay. But he shaped me, so sure. Minimum 80% was him. And I'm grateful for that also. And this is a dialectic. It's like it's this and it's this, right? The tricky parts were like, yeah, he was emotionally available often. And he spiritually bypassed, again, speaking to the emotional unavailability. And he enabled, so dismissed a lot of things, kind of avoided conflict and things, right? So then what does that do to someone, right? My perspective based off my experience, research, right? Experiences, professional and personal is like, or like the way that we show up in the world, the paradigms we have, the thoughts we have, the belief systems we have, the behavioral patterns we have, the relational patterns we have. We pick them up from our homes where we grow up, right? And so, like, the way that our caregivers interacted with one another, the way they interacted with us, the way they interacted with the world, right? And my dad was very unassuming too, right? Kind of like that humility, but I feel like it was too extreme of a humility where it was actually not humility by definition, because he didn't have a realistic view of himself. And he did belittle himself a lot, which is sad. So the consequences of growing up in a household like that to me were like I dated guys who were too nice, that were pushovers, that were doormats. And that was tricky because it's like my inner, if you look at internal family systems, I don't know a ton about it, but like my internal perpetrator, right, would come out because that's like what I learned from my mom. So if someone was nice and a pushover, like my dad, then the perpetrator, like my mom, would come out, right? Who would want to? I'm not saying that I would like abuse people per se, definitely not consciously. Mm, but yeah, so that was really triggering and I just couldn't do it. And then I dated a lot of covert narcissists. I dated an overt narcissist for sure. That's more my mom's pattern. And I married an overt narcissist, but by and large, most of the men I've dated have been covert narcissists. And that's been tricky. And like, obviously, I took accountability and thought about it and wondered, like, why am I attracting this, right? So back to 2019, that's when I really kind of, it's a bit after my divorce, and I really started to delve in and took like 6 weeks off of work or more. Actually, I think I had a summer off, but I went home to California and just vegged on my parents' couch and did spiritual work really and just took care of myself for 6 weeks. And I'm grateful for them allowing me to do that. It's nice to be the baby sometimes. But yeah, and right, I worked on that and I mean, I discovered a lot of these patterns, the covert narcissism. I realized ways in which my dad didn't, like, wasn't fully honest and stuff like that, just in general. And cared a lot about appearances, just in general. And so that was hard for me. I'm gonna come back and talk about what I talked about earlier in the video. And so, like, yes, we go through processes and stuff. To me, trauma is really intricately associated with grief. And so you can look up Google, right? Like 5 stages of grief. And so one of them is definitely anger. One is denial, right? And I was there for a long time. My dad, had him on a pedestal. Also, given my attachment style historically, which was like fearful, avoidant, right? Like, yes, a staple is to put people on pedestals. And so that I went through denial. And then at this point in time, I had a lot of anger there because all these things were coming to light and I could see them and he couldn't because he had all this emotional unavailability, which now, right, 2024, I see that, like, okay, let's look at him more objectively, right? It's like, I feel like in order to find peace with our parents, we have to allow ourselves to go through our own grieving process so that we can come back and have levels of acceptance. You don't have to. Please don't think that I'm telling you to do this or this is the only way. In my experience, this is what I find to be actually, yeah, the most helpful if you're gonna want to address this in a wholesome, integrated fashion. So yeah, I allowed myself to like go through all the stages of grief. I'm grateful that like whenever I would bring concerns up to my dad, he would at least entertain them, right? He wouldn't dismiss me or anything like that. Even if he did, I could validate myself, thankfully. But right. So, I did a lot of work. I've gone through periods of time in my life where I've had to stop talking to my dad because he was really triggering and right. So he did have a lot of the codependent patterns and it was very engulfing and it was way too much for me and it felt fake, right? And so that was tricky too. So I'm trying to get back to my main point. But it's like, how do those patterns develop, right? So like looking at him objectively, Mexican man, born in the 50s, okay, migrated to Mexico. I'm sorry, migrated within Mexico actually, yes, but migrated to the United States. Okay, had to learn a different language, like switch careers from like engineering to like honestly don't even know what to call it, but woodworking. So like art kind of basically. Management and then like entrepreneurship, like cool. Honestly, he did a lot, especially given like his trauma background. But like I know that he experienced a ton of physical abuse and verbal abuse at minimum, right? And so even spiritual abuse, honestly, I know that he was physically abused in Catholic school. So he had a low self-esteem and all these other things, right? And I look at my husband now and like he's doing a wonderful job, but like he's married to me, he has all these tools, he has all this information, he's pursuing his own social work career. That's great. thinking about my dad and then him being my parent with all these adversities. Plus, he didn't have access to the internet, but somehow he got a hold of all this information that I have. The majority of the information that I have honestly isn't new. Completely mesmerized and blown away. Right. And so it's a lot, right? Coming back to dialectics again, of holding space for everything. It sucked being his daughter. It wasn't fun. It was also amazing and the best thing ever. It also was hard and tricky and burdensome emotionally. And also, like, I wouldn't switch my dad for anything. Do I wish he had qualities that he didn't have? Absolutely. I wish he would have been more masculine and more protective and things like that. And all those things are true, right? And so, in delving into these different little veins, oh, I have some tension here. Oh, I have some grief here. Oh, I like these. I have these questions. I don't know the answers. Let me come back. Oh, more questions, more answers. Okay. In delving into all these different veins, that's allowed me to have a more full picture and find levels of acceptance, right? Period. Also, because I am a parent, I do notice ways in which his parenting style is reflected on myself in my parenting. And so I also have noticed a lot between like the ways that I parent and the ways that my sisters parent. And like I'm fortunate enough that I did have a father that was present for me, right? Sure, even though like we didn't connect the way that I needed when I was in crisis and stuff, still he did make time to spend every single day with me that he was home. So that was great. And we did play and we like just had fun with math and stuff like that, researching stuff. Teach their own, right? But yeah, and we did spend a lot of quality time, and that's how I learned to have quality time be a love language for me, right? And to give that to my offspring. And so it's a lot. Uh, period. Also, kind of looking out more socially, right? I know that he was very loved and well respected, and one thing that I enjoy about him is that he did walk in integrity a lot. And so that's really cool to see that all the people that I know that knew him, they all had the opposite of complaints, praises. I'm not sure to share about him. So that's pretty cool. And I enjoy that. I respect that a lot. And so it can be tricky. It can be tricky to find closure with parents, especially like, if they're deceased. I think, let me see. Okay, I'll go here and then I'll go into siblings. So then, well, fine. Sorry, I'm going to siblings first. I look at my sisters and they have different processes than I, right? I have one sister who has my dad very much on a pedestal. I have another sister who does have a more holistic view of him and does understand, and she's the oldest, and so she's done a lot of her own processing in her own ways. Right? She has a lot of acceptance, and so like it was annoying, but also helpful. That at times when I was in my grief process, honestly, she's come a long ways and she's been able to hold a lot of space for me. But like there were times where I would just be like venting. And she would be supportive. Moreover, she would be like, yes, and also this. And so that helped ground me, right? I feel like she was very balanced in that way, and I'm grateful for her and her perspective and her support. Uh, with like, okay, his death. I guess I'll just say like, and this is for me, and I know that this is weird, obviously not the norm. So to me, I do have God like above everything and all my values, right? I My spirituality has historically dictated all of my decisions in my life, or informed all my decisions in my life, right? And so whatever form my spirituality has taken throughout the years. And so I'll say, okay, so it's kind of random. So I went home in October 2019. Nope, 2020. I went home in October 2020. I wasn't planning on it. I'm pretty sure it was just on a whim. I think I was having a hard time emotionally, re-experiencing a breakup. And so I was like, it wasn't even a breakup. Anyways, I was going through some stuff. So I I was like, we're going to California. So it was one of those days. I just kind of got in my car and drove from Albuquerque, New Mexico to Southern California. And I spent like a day, honestly, and a half there, something like that. Because I don't know, I'm sure there were barriers. But right, I just went really quick, kind of in and out. That was the last time that I saw my dad and my grandma. How much do I get into it? I guess I'll just say like my grandma, I would say I was one of the pillars of my family before I moved out. And then it was my grandma and my dad, right? And so that was the last time that I saw them. My grandma was getting up there, like she was in her 80s. And so I had a feeling that that was going to be the last time that I ever saw her. And I kind of feel like God told me that, right? And this was like back, COVID was pretty thick and stuff. So like, yeah, I remember, ugh, I feel sad. I remember like saying goodbye, right? And then she wanted a hug, and I was like, "Are you sure?" It's like, what if, like, worst case, like, you get really sick and die? She's like, it's fine, it's worth it. I'd be ready. So that was pretty neat. Uh, for me, she represented the archetype of like the old matriarchal systems and um, like the old feminine, maybe a wounded feminine archetype, I'd say. And my dad, and she's the second biggest influence on that, actually. My dad and then my grandma. So it was a huge loss to lose both of them within the same week. Anyhow, my dad, um, I think so that was I think I said in 2019 summer, like I went through this whole process. By the time that I met with him in October 2020, I had a conversation with him, or a few, honestly. And really I had closure. And then I remember thinking, if he died, I would be okay. I say that because I think I live my way that way since I was probably like somewhere between 13 to 15. Whenever I first heard the term carpe diem, I was like, this is it. This is my motto. So I do live as if each day is my last, and I do my best to live in the present moment and consciously and stuff. Anyway, it's been almost 20 years. So, um, uh, represented for me the wounded masculine archetype. So it's just kind of interesting that like how much do I want to say? It's hard. Thank you if you're still watching. It's a long video. I do have a lot to say. If you care to watch it, like cool. Thanks for making it this far. Trying to see. Let me pause. I guess I'm gonna share it. So then cool. So then that was October, we were fine. And I honestly we were like great, but we were fine, right? Throughout the next few months, and we were kind of working on repairing our relationship a little bit more. So we're gonna fast forward. I did have plans to go back home to California for Christmas. So December of 2020, which is why I didn't want to go for my birthday. Because I was like, I'm gonna go for Christmas. Like it doesn't matter. But something was like, no, go now. So I'm so thankful that I went home then. Because hello, I wouldn't have been able to say goodbye. That'd be awful. That's why I listen to my internal voice. To me, I call it the Holy Spirit giving me guidance, but to each their own. Yes, it's my intuition, but I feel like it's connected to the Holy Spirit. Then I right. So I don't know, dude, like for the life of me, I couldn't get myself to go home to California for Christmas. I just couldn't. I was like, I don't know, something feels weird. What just like there's just resistance. Not something felt weird or off. It's just like there was an energetic resistance. And I was like, no, but I know that I have to listen to that. I trust my guidance system at this point, right? Like this is unfortunate. So then instead I traveled to Miami. I hit up a friend on a whim, and then I went. And then that was extremely life changing because I met my husband. So I'm glad that I did. Anyway, so then, yeah, it's just I couldn't go home. And then I went to Miami. I was like, well, let me stall, let me go, and I'll figure it out there. I'm sure. I just need to go to the beach. I'll figure it out. I go somewhere new. I'll figure it out. And lo and behold, while I was over there, I don't know if it was that same day. I'm pretty sure it was either that same night or the next day. I got a phone call or I called home, whatever. We spoke on the phone and then, excuse me, I got news that everyone was getting COVID. Your nephew has COVID, your niece just had COVID, your other nephew has COVID, their family has COVID, your sister has COVID. Okay, well, that's that. There's my answer. That's why I was guided to not go home, right? And I would have been home already if I had chosen to go to California. So cool. And I would have had my daughter with me. So I'm glad I didn't go. That was validating, and to me that felt like a blessing. Like, cool, stay here as long as you need, and then go be with your kid for Christmas. And so I did that. And then like I got news of like my dad kind of like declining. It's like at this point, okay, my dad had diabetes. At this point, he was diagnosed, let's see, maybe when I was like 8, 9, maybe even 10, something like that. And at this point, he would basically get a flu or a cold every year, right? And it'd been like 10 years. So it's like, okay, he's sick again. But this time it did feel weird. It did feel different. And I kind of felt like I need to monitor or something. Anyways, so I did. I did call home often. And then one day, I guess I heard like, so this is COVID trauma, if this is a trigger for you. Try to keep it light though. I guess somebody told me that my mom called the ambulance because my dad couldn't breathe, or that's kind of what I remember. Everything was so pieced together, like it wasn't a cohesive story, and everything was just kind of scattered in one. Because hello, it's a trauma. Two, because my family communicates that way. So I guess yeah, my mom called an ambulance. My dad went. My dad protested it a lot, but he wasn't very coherent, so he went to the hospital, and then. mm, Yeah. Mm, plug it in. Okay, sure, I'll keep going. So then right, I was in contact with my family at some point. I remember like okay, cool. I remember like FaceTiming my dad. I remember the date of the last FaceTime conversation that we had. I remember us talking on the phone a little bit here and there, and he was really incoherent. And I do want to make a COVID video at some point. Let me write that down. But anyways, and so the point is, at some point I told my mom like, yo, I feel a shift and like I feel like he's probably gonna die actually. She's like, yeah, now that you mention it, same. I was like, cool, get everything in order, please. And so she did. What do you need from me? You know, that kind of thing. And then yeah, surely enough, he passed. Before he did, I remember talking to him at some point, and then I asked him if I could like do a Reiki session for him. Once I had that shift, right? And he said, yeah. And then I it was really cool because I did get a vision of like his parents when his mom was pregnant and kind of that, like, maybe them waiting for him in the afterlife or just that gratitude or like his beginning kind of like his end really. So that was really cool. And he did say that he felt the Reiki session and that it was helpful and I'm grateful for that. And we did get enough notice and we were able to like all kind of say goodbye at the same time, which is great. Even though I didn't have the money to go to California to go see him. Honestly, I think they told us the same day. So it's like, even if I tried, I absolutely wouldn't make it on time. So I didn't go. On top of the fact that my body was like, don't go. So I didn't go. That's what happened. Um, but yeah, and so since he died, I mean, I guess like when he died, I felt neutral, right? I was like, yeah, this was meant to happen. And I kind of saw everything play out in order right before my eyes. And I reflected and thought, like, yeah, it makes sense. Everything makes sense. And I felt calm and like I didn't really feel too much of the grief until like later that year or the following year. Like, not even, maybe even a year and a half later. And then I've been kind of processing a lot of the grief here and there. It was so traumatic. In a way, I think that like I just okay, so the trauma wasn't that he died and then my grandma died. Yeah, that was rough. But it was more so the void that they left and the dynamics in my family. And so everyone's way more estranged now, and that impacted me. Because at least like I could go back to family before, but since my dad died, no. So that's unfortunate. It hurts people. And so the last thoughts I have on this are, yeah, I stopped journaling altogether because it was just a lot of feelings, but not words. And part of me, like, I wasn't ready to feel, couldn't feel something like that, but it's a lot, you know? Again, it wasn't so much the pain of him being gone, even though, okay, like, it wasn't as much the pain of him being gone. It was more so the void. But then, like, also, like, he's a blah person that I would go to for life advice and stuff. And like I had to make a lot of business decisions. And, like I wish that I would call him. I could call him because he was the person that I go to, or like so I'd go to for spiritual advice and to him. And I miss that, right? I've gotten married since he died. I've had a kid since he died, and so like it's hard. I wish he were there to like see all this. It's like, hey, dude, like I finally married a guy who like is your ideal son, honestly, and I know that like my dad would be an ideal dad to my husband, and it would just be really cool for them to get to meet each other, but they never did in this life. So that's the biggest grief, right? Again, it's all the voids. Anyway, and so having reached his 3-year death anniversary, I'm just grateful for the man that he was and all his shortcomings. There were so many lessons for me to learn, and he did so much work on himself. I see now. Like honestly, he couldn't have shaped me the way that he did without having done all that work. And like people didn't do therapy back then. Hello, in the 80s? No. So I really am grateful so much for that man and all the doors that he opened to me. And yeah, thank you for listening. I think like I'm not sure why I was guided to share that story. Clearly there are a lot of things there. But I guess more than anything, this video is to like support anybody who is going through any kind of grieving process in regards to forgiving their parents. If I can, if I have time, etc., like I'll come back and I'll make videos regarding my other family members. But for now, this is about my dad. And so yeah, I think that's all I feel guided to say. Please feel free to like, share, comment. I'd appreciate that. That would support the channel for sure. If you care for a session, consultation, training, or interested in any of our services, just more information in general, right? I would say check out our site. We're at loveishealingllc.com. I have my own page there. Mine is /Magnolia. If you go there, we're going to keep posting content if we can. And yeah, I want to grow this channel and engage more people. I would love that. I am very much a person who like responds to others, and that's how I think. I can come up with my own things, but it's kind of slower. But if someone speaks or asks me a question, then my mind just gets super activated, and then I can speak more. So please engage with us if you'd like. And you can find us on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. Our handles at Love is Healing LLC. I think that's all. If you still want to come back and put it in. Anyhow, thank you all so much. So much. Take care. Until next time.